And we're late. We're really late. 9:34. We had some technical hiccups, some staffing issues. But there you go. We're here, though. 9:35. Only 35 minutes late. Mark Carney commits to defense. Canada facing a housing crisis. Food inflation in Canada. And another Canadian media outlet goes dark. All that and a lot more here on The Really Big Show. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. With me, Ian Burns, our managing editor out there in Ottawa. Beautiful day here in the Okanagan. Another sunshiny day. It was a beautiful weekend as well. How are things in the nation's capital?
Very ugly. Very ugly here today. It was raining
Talking about the
earlier.
weather. Talking about the weather.
Oh yeah, that's ugly too. It's just grim. Yeah, it's been a real washout really this summer.
Again, are we talking about the weather?
We're not even officially in the summer yet, are we?
Are we talking about the weather, or what are we talking about?
Just talking about everything, really. Everything to do with Ottawa.
All right. Again, we apologize for being late, and it might get a little clunky. We're missing a few things on the screen, but we're going to go anyway, because it's all about the content, isn't it? We're going to first play a clip here with Mark Carney talking about spending on national defense here.
Our military infrastructure and equipment have aged, hindering our military preparedness. I'll give an example or two. Only one of our 4 submarines is seaworthy. Less than half our maritime fleet and land vehicles are operational. More broadly, we're too reliant on the United States. And so for all those reasons, I'm announcing today that Canada will achieve NATO's 2% of GDP target this year, half a decade ahead of schedule. And we will further accelerate our investments in years to come. We will ensure that every dollar is invested wisely, including by prioritizing made-in-Canada manufacturing and supply chains. We should no longer send 3/4 of our defense capital spending to America. We will invest in new submarines, aircraft, ships, armed vehicles, and artillery, as well as new radar, drones, and sensors to monitor the seafloor and the Arctic. We will undertake this transformation of our military capabilities strategically, deliberately, and impactfully. Canada's Department of National Defence will immediately design a new defence policy that reflects both today's and tomorrow's threats, informed by experts, some in this room, and the experience of allies and partners, including Ukraine. We're in the process of creating a new defense procurement agency that will be guided by that new defense industrial strategy and overseen by our newly appointed Secretary of State for Defense Procurement. The Defense Procurement Agency will centralize decision-making and move at pace to get our armed forces the equipment they need when they need it. We will ensure that Canadian workers and businesses benefit from the huge increase in defense procurement that will be required, using Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, Canadian critical minerals, Canadian cyber. So we can defend every inch of our sovereign territory, from seafloor to the Arctic to cyberspace. So we can protect Canadians, our interests, and our allies.
Did you hear that, Ian?
I did, yeah.
There you go. How was the volume on your end? I was just worried about the volume.
Very amusing man, isn't he, Mark Carney? He's a barrel of laughs in some ways. I love that bit where he said, half a decade ahead of schedule. It's like, you mean the schedule that you made? Your schedule? Which was already considered to be like an absolute abomination in terms of how late it was. Already decades later than it should have been. But he's like, ahead of schedule, guys. That's how good we are. He really makes me laugh. But I suppose that there are lots of people out there who are just like lapping this up. They just can't get enough of this, can they?
Yeah, it's our military has been in abysmal shape, underinvested in, poor equipment, poor recruitment numbers, underpaid. Yeah, under. So at least he's putting some attention on it. There you go. Trudeau just ignored
Well,
it.
one of the things, this is like in general, other than my wry remark just then, in general, I would say my main takeaway from this is just how vague it is. Like, as usual with this government, and particularly with this prime minister, there's a lot of solemn tones used, and there's a lot of hype, and then nothing is said. I mean, he didn't say anything. There's no details. He said, we're going to get it up to 2% of GDP, which is about to become a very small amount of spend on defense by NATO standards. If NATO is really going to push this 5% thing, then that's going to be less than half. So not something to be celebrated, but something to be ashamed of, even though it's being celebrated now by Carney as if he's conquered the world. But he said that's going to happen by March. By the end of March, so the end of this fiscal year, that's when 2% of GDP will go in. But other than that, I mean, they sent us a press release, and there's a few things listed, but it's just so vague. I mean, there's a list of about sort of 7 bullet points here, at the top of which is better pay for people in the forces, which is quite good. But there's not really very much here. It's just to think that he's made this gigantic announcement, and there's a tiny page of a press release here with barely any information on it. CBC, for some reason, they're reporting that they understand that the Coast Guard is going to be shifted entirely now into Department of Defense. So that's apparently like $2.5 billion, which is more than 10% of this overall boost.
So there's a boost,
so
right?
Just fiddling with the account.
Just moved it around, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, God knows how much of that kind of thing is going to be at play. But it's the same old trickery, you know, cheap tricks, vagueness, ambiguity. You know, this government, they make an announcement, and then you have to wait about 6 months before you discover what it actually means. And you discover all of the flaws that it has, you know? So, but whatever. I mean, if Donald Trump, really, this is just to impress Donald Trump. If he's stupid enough to fall for it, then Bob's your uncle, really. And if soldiers get a bit more money, then that's a moral success. But I mean, other than that, I wouldn't get too excited about this, because I think we need details. You just can't, you can't run a government like this. It's just ridiculous. You couldn't even run an ice cream store like this, never mind a government.
One of the things he mentioned that only one of the diesel submarines is actually is active right now. We bought a couple of those from a UK garage sale a number of years back, like a lot of years back. And running diesel subs in this world and technology, very, very noisy compared to like nuclear subs and that. Is there any mention of a nuclear sub in there?
Nothing that I saw, no.
You know what I mean? Like, if you think about it,
there aren't specifics. I mean, if we could get an interview with our Colona MP there, that might be good, because he was actually named, well, not by name, but his job title was named by Carney in this speech. He might know, but we certainly don't know. The press, and I say the press, really I should say, the Canadian people has absolutely no idea what they have planned. It's just the announcement of a number. And I guess the reason, if you're wondering, like, why on earth has he gone to the press, gone to the public when when he's got nothing to give? There's just no information here. Why has he done that? I'd say the answer is that in 6 days is the G7 summit. That's why he just wanted to announce it before that.
And why nuclear subs are so important. We obviously have, I think, if not the largest coastline, if we consider all our 3 exposures in coast, they're at the Pacific, Atlantic, and Arctic Ocean. The Arctic Ocean, the only thing that really moves around out there freely is a submarine. And we have one.
And icebreakers, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, a submarine can move freely, whereas an icebreaker is going to move through that same channel that they bust through, right? So, but, like for how long have we had just diesel subs up there? When, the Americans have nuclear subs up there, the Russians have, and for some strange reason, so do the Chinese.
But it's also, you'd think, wouldn't you, that Canada would have learned its lesson from the 1940s and the Battle of the Atlantic? That was in many ways a battle between submarines, really, on both sides. But it was all about submarines. That was they're such a crucial tool, and they were, even in the First World War, they were so crucial. And you would think that Canada would be wise to that, because obviously the Battle of the Atlantic was about Canada, or rather the other way around. It's about Europe having access to Canada and the US. If that's important to us, which I gather from Mark Carney's speech as it is, Europe's all important apparently to Mark Carney, we should at least secure the Atlantic, or try to, and that can only really be done with submarines.
And the Arctic for sure. And then more from Mark Carney here, the feds to pick and choose projects. And the federal cabinet will decide which energy projects are deemed nation building, said Carney. However, cabinet would not override objections from any premier under the bill tabled to the Commons. So what does that really mean? We'll identify projects of national interest, those that strengthen Canada's self-reliance, resilience, and security, offering compelling benefits to Canada, have a high probability of being completed, are a priority for Indigenous communities to contribute to the clean growth, and Canada's climate objectives. For projects that meet these criteria, we will consider them approved from the outset and expedite the assessment process. And then a reporter asked, why did you decide to make this a political decision that gives authority to the minister in consultation with the Prime Minister to make those decisions? So what does that say to Alberta?
Also, what does that say to Canadians that vote for Mark Carney or vote for the Liberal Party because of Mark Carney? Because Mark Carney said, build, baby, build. We're going to do it. We're going to get this done. It's all about independence from the United States, blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, brilliant, I'll vote for you, mister. And then now that he's elected, he's very slowly and gradually starting to sound like Chrystia Freeland or Justin Trudeau.
Here's
the same old thing.
Here's the most important piece in it, I think, if you're Danielle Smith listening to this. Say there's a pipeline project you believe in and that's in a national interest, but there's a province like Quebec or BC that doesn't want it. Are you going to push it through anyway? And the response to the reporter from Carney was, no, we need to have consensus. From all the provinces, and Carney said, all the provinces and the Indigenous people. If the provinces don't want it, it's impossible. It's not the federal government's choice. We will not impose a project on a province.
I mean, that's kind of like putting, it's like putting 13 people together in a room who all have very dramatically different views and priorities, and then saying that they can have a democracy where they decide what they do. They decide what food they eat, where they go, and all the rest of it. But if one single one of them says they don't want it, then they don't do anything. So in other words, it's almost just like anarchy. I mean, and I mean that quite seriously. This is like anarchy, like the actual theory of government called anarchism. That's kind of what this looks like. It's just like, we'll do nothing, basically. Well, what's the point of having a federal government? And also, as I said earlier, does this mean like any other project, not just as in shovels in the ground, but any other project, including the carbon tax regime, which is still in place on industrial output? Does that also need a consensus? What about things like health transfers? What about equalization? Does that need consent of all provinces? So can Alberta now just say, we don't like equalization anymore, actually, and then that's the end of equalization? How is this going to work? Because if it just takes one person to veto something, then, I mean, I guess it should apply across the board, shouldn't it? Anything that Ottawa does. It's just, it's like government by clown car, isn't it? It's just, it is actually quite upsetting, and it doesn't really matter whose side you're on. It doesn't matter if you're a Liberal or not, or if you're a Conservative or whatever. Just looking at this should make you feel bad, I think. It should make you feel sad about Canada.
There was a response here in this Blacklock story, and it's from the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre. He said that he found the Prime Minister's remarks troubling, and that he said that the premiers will have a veto on resource projects and pipelines. Well, the most promising pipeline is the Northern Alberta, the Pacific Coast, and the NDP Premier of BC has said no to pipelines. Is the Prime Minister saying we're not going to get any pipelines built? We did talk about it on Friday. I attended that Colona Chamber event where Brenda Bailey, the finance minister, spoke and said that they're moving ahead with their LNG pipeline for British Columbia, and she did say no to oil and gas pipelines. So, and then she said that there's other things to work on with Alberta, but how willing is Alberta going to be to work with British Columbia if the most important, the most important thing from Alberta is oil and gas?
That's what Danielle Smith tried to make that point when she was on CTV at the weekend, and she tried to talk about how much money it's going to bring in and all the rest of it, and how that's like, she basically said all these projects next to oil, next to a new oil pipeline, all these projects are like minnows. They're tiny.
Right.
The real story is oil, which I think a lot of people would agree with. But she was also asked about the BC veto, and she sounded quite sort of hopeless and weak. Actually, she just sort of said, "I'm convinced that David Eby is on Team Canada, and therefore I'm convinced that I can persuade him to say yes." And you just think, is that the best you've got then? The best you've got is trying to convince a man who is, probably the most left-wing premier in Canada, at least the way he speaks, very committed to sort of the Green movement, and is also reliant on the Green Party to stay in power. You reckon he's going to change his mind? I mean, I wouldn't be that confident.
Here's a tip for David Eby. Just pick up the phone, dial Danielle Smith, and say, "It's you erased our debt, our deficit, and you can have your pipeline." And see if British Columbians want that.
Well, the thing is, talking about consent and talking about what the people want and all that, I mean, according to the polls, and there were numerous polls,
yeah, they want a pipeline.
Everybody in Canada, every province, every age group, every political party, all the rest of it, they all want projects, including pipelines.
Apparently
so
not
this
the
is
people.
This is
Apparently not the people that
fundamentally
matter.
anti-democratic. This is going against the will of the Canadian people.
And to add to that, housing continues to eat at the budgets of Canadians. Now at 52% of the budget, housing costs will average 52% of household income this year, and that's from a federal memo. These memos come out all the time and nobody pays attention to them. Right? The figure was, in 2015, when Trudeau and the Liberals took office, was 38%. Middle-income households across Canada are finding it increasingly hard to buy homes, said this 2024 transition binder. These households are often staying in the rental housing longer, placing additional pressures on rental supply and increasing rental costs. The department blamed municipal fees in part for the higher shelter costs, zoning laws and planning restrictions that limit construction of high-density homes near infrastructure and transit. Staff cited figures at the Canadian Home Builders Association detailing lengthy approval times from construction permits in municipalities nationwide. And we've seen that even here in Colona and Lake Country. We did a story, a year and a half to get a building permit for a single-family home.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they highlight that zoning laws and planning, all the municipal fees and everything.
Staff cited figures from the Canadian Home Builders Association. Approval ranged from 3 months in Charlottetown, well, you get houses done there, 4 months in Saskatoon, 5 months in Calgary and Winnipeg, 7 months in Edmonton, 8 months in St. John's, 13 months in Ottawa, 15 months in Vancouver, 21 months in Halifax, 32 months in Toronto.
But this is exactly what Pierre Poilievre rabbited on about all the time. That's what I find interesting about that. I mean, again, it's like his platform is it ages well, doesn't it? As each new bit of information comes out, it seems he was onto something in a few areas.
Why don't they put somebody in charge of the housing portfolio that's built houses? Because this is the 5th federal housing minister in 6 years. 6 years. 5, and no success. And then their goals are lofty. And they said right now, they have a strong view on housing. And according to the Department of Canada calculator, would require construction of 3.5 million homes by 2030, in addition to business as usual. So that's in addition. The gap is 2 million homes right now.
Well, let's see if these modular homes can make life any better for anyone.
I don't know if a modular home of 300 square foot is going to make it any better for anybody that is trying to raise a family. Well, I got lots to talk on the wildfires, and we got a little clip here to play from Scott Moe here. We're going to play this clip from Scott Moe, Premier of Saskatchewan.
The past week is that many, if not virtually all of the fires that we're dealing with in Saskatchewan are, although not intentionally, are human caused. And some of those have been intentionally human caused. And there's the RCMP have informed us that they have now charged a couple of individuals, one with respect to some fires that were being started in the Smeaton Snowden area, and another individual that started the fire that originated out of Weaquin, which is known as the Ditch Fire, which is a significant fire that is encroaching on the community of L'Orange.
Yeah, and we've seen that in Manitoba as well. Like a lot of the fires are human caused either by error or by intention. And two people have been
in the next while, the past
setting
week
wildfires
is that many, if not
Saskatchewan there.
I mean, not every year in BC, it's the same story. The majority are human caused.
Oh.
It's mostly people that are responsible for this. But whether or not it's, I mean, now and then you get people charged with arson. But I mean, whether or not the majority are intentional, I mean, that's another question, isn't it?
I mean, you have to think about it. If it was the climate was causing most of the fires, they would happen all over in the unpopulated areas, but they tend to start near homes and in interface areas where it's nice and convenient, right? Like, you know, like he's talking about the Ditch Fire there.
Yeah, well, I can't help but with my evil, nefarious mind, I can't help but think, if you were an enemy of Canada's, and you wanted to hurt Canada, but not you didn't want to like fire a missile at Toronto or something like that, but you wanted to harm Canada, you would obviously dispatch a few SADC spies to go and start fires, wouldn't you? And, I mean, it's kind of like a no-brainer. You would do that, wouldn't you? Because it creates absolute hell. It costs billions of dollars, spreads misery, it has problems for like health. It also like has a political effect. It causes chaos in the political realm. So I do wonder if our devious enemies are playing games, but you'd like to think the authorities would be onto that sort of thing.
So Alberta's back on the booze. Alberta resumes buying U.S. alcohol months after that pause that was set up to fight the tariffs. So Alberta is buying American alcohol, gambling machines again 3 months after the Premier Smith announced restrictions aimed at fighting back against the U.S. tariffs, and said that move signals a renewed commitment to open and fair trade. I think maybe some of the stuff is positioning for the G7 as well, which is not too far away now.
Yep, 6 days. But my main question with this, again, this has been my question all along. What American alcohol are you drinking? And if so, why? What's wrong with you? Why are you drinking American alcohol? It's absolute garbage. I mean, for me, this is like, there's nothing lost whatsoever if you can't have access to American alcohol. There are a few like very small breweries in America that produce some really nice beers, and obviously there's a few good wines out of California and that kind of thing. But overall, if all the things that you would have to do without from the United States, alcohol's got to be top of the list. I just can't. I don't get it. Why is there such a fuss about this?
And if you're worried about your health, just do without. Period. Just end it right there. Do without.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's the next step.
I do without, and I don't miss it. I drank all I needed to drink when I was 19. I believe I was drunk for a full year. I think I drank my share, so I put it aside after that. Another one that's tough here is beef prices surging here in Canada, just absolutely going crazy. Like if you've been anywhere, you're going to notice, like even in Costco, you're going to notice that the prices have gone through the roof. Prices for strip loin steak are like 34% higher, top sirloin 33% higher. Pork ribs and chicken breasts are only up 5.9, only up, right? So, and then this study pointed to several factors behind the jump in prices, including transportation costs, the carbon tax, and the number of licensed beef processors and labor costs. There you go. And Canadian inventory is also an issue. It's fallen to like 3.38 million head. A lot of farmers or ranchers had left the industry, like all that talk about, climate change and cattle destroying the climate and everything like that. So, and people are going to eat, vegetarians are going to become vegetarians or eat crickets. And then so that, like had some people leave the industry, and now we have a shortage as well.
Cows are like probably the #1 enemy, aren't they, for a lot of
Bill Gates?
extremist
Bill Gates and the
climate
crew.
activist types. Yeah, like
Bill
the more
Gates.
sort of fringe maniac ones, like Greta Thunberg, they look at cows as kind of like a sin, a mortal sin to even do it, because obviously it's like they burp and fart, don't they, and they put methane into the atmosphere, and then also they require a lot of they require sort of per cow requires a certain amount of land, doesn't it, to produce the feed. And that
Grazing,
upsets them a lot. And also just beef in general is kind of associated with like men, isn't it? And like masculinity and like Texas and stuff like Alberta and cowboy hats. So I think there's probably some kind of aesthetic, hostility that they have to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, the only way you can kind of beat it a little bit is if you go to Costco and you buy yourself, like the bigger, like a strip loin or something like that yourself, and cut it yourself, and you'll save a little bit for sure. Or try to find a rancher and buy or split a half a side with somebody. We used to do that in the past. We got a clip here from the food professor. He says, Canada currently has the highest food inflation rate among G7 countries, except for Japan, which is a unique case. But when you unpack Canada's situation, much of the grocery store inflation is policy-induced. There you go, policy-induced. So let's play this clip here from the food professor here. You want to see if you can? Okay, we're gonna maybe we'll come back to that. We've lost that clip, and Nick can tell if he gets it back. But we'll go on to Bill C-18. Chat TV goes dark after the station shuts down. So again, another one, Medicine Hat's TV station shutting down, ending 70 years of local production, resulting in 14 to 16 layoffs. And that's a Pattison Group station, and another one. That goes dark with Bill C-18. We said close to 100 have died since the introduction of Bill C-18, and Bill C-18 is still in force. And for what reason, we don't know. Communities are right now being put at risk with wildfires, and no way for outlets to get their news on social media. The same social media that the government, Liberal government, who was boycotting Meta, has said that it's so important for them to get their information on Meta, they actually went out and paid millions and millions of dollars for it. How exciting.
It's indefensible, really, isn't it? I mean, I don't know the extent to which C-18 has caused the death of this station, but I mean, they do operate on very fine margins at the best of times. Yeah. And I'm sure losing their ability to put links on Facebook will have hurt them, certainly.
All outlets have lost half their traffic, and we've done stories with CBC as well. They've lost half their traffic, and CBC, the study that they quoted, said that just Canadians are reading less news because they don't access it. They're not going to websites. They're finding it through social media.
Yeah, well, it was the way that they sort of explained it is that it's like it was serendipitous, as in they didn't go out looking for news. It just emerged while they were on their travels on Facebook or whatever, and then they sort of went, "Oh, that's interesting. I'll click on this," which is kind of obvious when you think about it like that. When it's actually when it's phrased in that way. So it's no surprise. I mean, and Facebook very disingenuously also tried to say, didn't they, that they said people aren't really interested in news, generally speaking. But it's not so much that people aren't interested in news. I think people are news mad. I don't think people have ever been this obsessed with news in history. No. I think it's almost like a disease that people have, the news obsession. And I think it's absolutely at a peak now. But it's just the difference is they don't buy a newspaper or sit down and say, okay, it's time to watch global news.
Yeah,
that doesn't really happen anymore.
They're getting their content from the social channels.
It happens throughout their day, in a sort of a disorganized, unpredictable way. But they're still all about news, big time. I mean, obviously they are. Try and have a conversation with someone, anywhere, about anything, and pretty soon news will come up.
Yeah. And then this little post here from they sent it to me, the Western Standard, that Bill C, the Liberals passed C11 to control what you see online. Now go to the next one. And C18 to block news on platforms like Facebook. And Bill C63 could let them label your opinions as hate speech. There's a lot of control on the internet. If you go to the next slide there. There you go.
Western Standard will probably be condemned as hate speech, won't they, if that bill goes through?
I'm sure you and I will make it in there as well. And then just the next one here in the Online News Act, again, continues. It continues and it continues. Any luck with that clip, or we're going to move past it? Okay, we're going to play that clip from the food professor. We're going back to that clip.
Looking at some of the recent inflation data, a lot of it is actually human-induced, related to trade policy, not just in Canada, but around the world. And the tone was set by the White House a while ago. I think we all know that. There's a bit of a tariff war going on, and countries are responding to America in different ways, including Canada with counter-tariffs. And our belief is that counter-tariffs have actually made food more expensive in recent months. Just to give you an idea, the food inflation rate right now is at 3.8%, which is triple of what it was 2 months ago.
Wow.
In the US, with all of the craziness around Trump's policy and tariffs, food inflation has gone down to 2%, which means that the American economy is much more well equipped to absorb geopolitical shocks than we are. We're not as competitive. We don't have that kind of, with the same population density and things like that. So Trump can afford a trade war. You'll never win a trade war. You don't win a trade war, but you can afford a trade war. Whereas in Canada, our margin of error is very, very slim.
There you go. There's a good piece of knowledge for you as you're traveling through your day. Elbows up.
Well, the thing is, America, just look at America on a map. Just the lower 48 states. It's a continent, basically. And I know, obviously, Canada's bigger, but America is a continent full of arable land and
then full of people too.
Good climates. Obviously, they've got more stuff.
And if you look at the population density of Canada, it's mostly on the line, right on the border, and then you have a couple of spots here and there. Whereas the U.S. is fairly diverse. Their coastlines are definitely the most populated, but it's fairly populated throughout there, and they have 10 times the population that Canada has.
Well, the Midwest and the sort of Mississippi, the land around the Mississippi, that is just, that's pretty much the best farmland on earth. And it's so well connected, and they've got the river there, and they have loads of towns, obviously very big, famous towns like St. Louis and all that, next to the river. And they use that to transport their goods. And then they can get it to places like the coasts and all the rest of it. Geopolitical nerds, like geopolitical strategists and people like that, they obsess about America's geography because it's just unbelievable. They're so fortunate. And obviously Canada's is very good, but there is no east-west river. There's no Mississippi River that goes from Vancouver to Toronto or something like that. It's just not the same. It's a lot harder to transport things. And then obviously the climate is harder, and there's less land, less arable land,
Well, maybe that's another option for Danielle Smith to go south and then go along the Columbia River to the port. Just throwing it out there.
Is it even, I don't know, is it navigable from anywhere in Alberta? I'm not sure it is, but...
Oh, no, you got to go down.
You
got to go down through Idaho or Washington and then cut across, Talking about the United States, so that National Guard, Trump sent the National Guard into LA, and Gavin Newsom pushing back on that. And he has pledged to sue the federal government, but those riots have been going on for a few days now in Los Angeles, and they've set a whole bunch of Waymos on fire. Actually, Waymo pulled out and said that we're not going to be running Waymos in Los Angeles until this calms down.
Some really crazy images. That's the Associated Press there, that little tweet, and that's CTV. I don't even think that's the craziest image. I think the iconic image is the the Mexican flag that you're seeing everywhere. That's like
Yeah.
the flag of a foreign country is being waved by people who are attacking American officials, like representatives of the American state. That's, to me, that's like, whoa, that's like a big deal. That's crazy. And that's not, if that was happening somewhere else, if that was happening in, well, it does happen sometimes in places like France, where people waving the Algerian flag are violent towards police. And it's kind of like, that's what people focus on. It's like, wow, this is crazy. But in America, for some reason, they're not interested.
Yeah, I mean, some of the Democrats have had some pretty fiery rhetoric and actually trying to fire up the crowds. And it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out, because it's definitely, if you read some of the headlines, it sounds like this is the showdown that the Trump administration was looking for from some of these sanctuary cities or states.
Yeah, but it seems like they've been building towards this too, the sort of Democrat side, because they made these sanctuary cities. That was a very confrontational thing to do. And talk about how it's being phrased, how it's being framed, let's say, by Democrats, media that's sympathetic to the Democratic Party. Like the BBC, for example, said this all kicked off in their main story that's still on their website, as far as I'm aware, where they explain how this all started. They say immigration officials went into a heavily Latino part of Los Angeles to deport people. So they're trying to racialize it, make it a racial thing. But immediately when I was reading that, and this is the case for anybody that knows anything about Los Angeles, when I looked at that, I thought, why on earth have you said heavily Latino? The largest racial population in Los Angeles is Latino people, Hispanics, or what they call non-white Hispanics, or however they class it in the US. So there are many parts of Los Angeles that are heavily Latino. It's just such a stupid way to phrase it, such a weird way to phrase it. It's like talking about somewhere in Vancouver and saying like heavily Chinese or heavily white or something. It's like, have you been to Vancouver? Like, what are you talking about? But this is going to happen. I think this is going to intensify as well, where they're going to try and make it a racial thing, because obviously the Democrats kind of lost the Hispanic vote. They kind of had that in the bag for many years, and they've basically, well, they haven't lost it entirely, but they've lost they dominated that demographic, and now it's kind of like 50-50 between the Republicans and the Democrats. So I think any opportunity that they can find to try and stir the pot there, and try and make it seem like the Trump administration is racist somehow, that's going to be jumped on.
There is threats of putting the U.S. Marines on the ground, and obviously there's a whole bunch of laws and that effect about putting Marines on the ground. And then you have Marco Rubio, that's the Secretary of Defense as well. So it's definitely likely to escalate before it calms down.
Well, yeah, but this is fundamentally, and this is one of the areas in which Trump is right, I think, even though I would say he's wrong a vast amount of the time. But he's right when he says, and one of his catchphrases has always been, for the last sort of 10 years or whatever, has been, if you don't have immigration laws, you don't have a country. That to me is very succinct and very accurate. And if you can't enforce immigration laws and you can't enforce your border, you don't have a country. It just doesn't exist anymore, because then it's just open to all people. It stops being unique in that sense. It just becomes a geographic area. And this obviously is being framed by the Republican side as they're stopping us from enforcing the border and immigration laws. Therefore, they're preventing America from existing almost. So it's really like, it's quite deep principles that are clashing here. So I think this could be the showdown that everyone's kind of been expecting for a while. I think this will get considerably worse, I would say.
And again, the U.S. tech firms arguing against the CRTC in Canada here in court. Some of the biggest tech companies in the world will make their case in court today after rejecting an order from the CRTC to hand over a portion of their revenues for the creation of more Canadian news and content. And Apple, Spotify, Amazon are among the firms arguing against the order, which instructs them to pay 5% of the Canadian revenues to produce Canadian media, including local TV news. There you go. So there you go. And this is the thing. The Canadian government continues, like with Bill C-18 and these types of things, to look for ways to fund it. They should allow the free market to fund the news. Should they not? Do you know what I mean?
Well, this is the exact same. This is precisely the same idea, isn't it, as C18?
Yeah.
This is just an attempt. It's an attempt to kind of shave off a little bit of the profits of these wealthy American companies, and then give that money to, Canadian news outlets, or
including
whatever.
local TV news. And we're seeing that most of the local TV news, like including Global, and then we just saw that television station there in Medicine Hat. There's only been one left. So this is funding for who? CBC?
But it's like fundamentally, though, the problem is it doesn't work. Even if it was a good idea, and even if you could justify it like morally or whatever, philosophically, it doesn't work because these companies are too strong. They're too big. They've got the ear of the president, and then the president, doesn't matter who it is, Trump or Biden, then comes to Canada and says, "What the hell are you doing? Like, get rid of this stuff." And in this case here, they just haven't paid it. They refuse, and they've just gone to court instead. So, like, it obviously doesn't work. So, kind of, my advice would be cut your losses. Just forget it. It doesn't work. Think of another way to raise this money.
Well, or just make it so that they're competitive and repeal Bill C-18. Take your knee off the throat of independent media. This story here, Greta Thunberg.
Probably work a bit better. Yeah.
Greta Thunberg, Mark Carney, what did he idolize her? Greta Thunberg has been prevented to sail into the war zone. Anti-Israeli activist Greta Thunberg has been prevented to sailing to Gaza by Israeli authorities. Israel said that the selfie yacht in which she was traveling can head instead to Israel. Thunberg and her associate will be promptly deported. Meanwhile, she has been claimed that she's been kidnapped. Yeah, so she did a little selfie video there that getting ready to be, and I guess released it before, making some accusations that turned out to be not true.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite a lot of people in organizations have embarrassed themselves by coming out and, buying into this ridiculous sort of PR stunt, like Amnesty International. That used to be quite a respected charity, didn't it? They've come out and said that, like, this is a disgrace and Israel is ignoring international law and all the rest of it. I mean, she's an agitator. She's a left-wing extremist and an agitator, and she's gone. It's like, it's like if Alex Jones or something got a yacht and sailed to Venezuela or something like that, or God knows where, Cuba or something like that, to have like an anti-communist crusade. What do you think they would do? What do you think they would do to Alex Jones in that situation? She is. But this is the thing, that a lot of the institutions are so gormless that they don't realize this, that she is the left-wing Alex Jones. Nobody in the middle, or nobody sane and non-partisan, wants anything to do with this strange little woman. She's an absolute freak and an extremist.
According to the Telegraph out in England there, Zahir Firewall is the founding member of the group which organized the aid boat boarded and seized by Israeli forces. So he's the money behind Greta's Gaza flotilla.
Not really a surprise there. Not a surprise that a Hamas operative in speech marks would be residing in London either. There's quite a number of them in London, paid for by the taxpayer, hilariously. But it's just, I think Mark Carney as well, I know you mentioned him, he made an absolute fool out of himself. One of many, dozens, probably hundreds of people, including Justin Trudeau, he was another one, to make absolute gigantic fools out of themselves by elevating this woman and giving her a stamp of approval for her very foolish and mostly inaccurate activism related to climate change. So now she's got this name. She has a big name. This news story, we're talking about this news story in part because of people like Mark Carney, because they gave her the platform, even though she was quite obviously an extremist and an agitator then too. But it's just, now she's doing something that's more controversial and, less fashionable.
Do you remember during the beginning days of COVID, CNN had her on the panel as a COVID expert?
I can vaguely remember that, yeah.
They got a little bit of backlash for it. She was the COVID expert. Like, she was like Bill Gates. She was like the young Bill Gates. He's a scientist. He's a like food expert. He's a vaccine expert, and I don't know.
Fertility expert, I think, as well, isn't he?
What's that?
fertility expert, I think, is that's another one of his areas.
And he was also an expert on Epstein relations because he visited that, according to the divorce papers there, I think it was 27 visits or something like that. You'd have to check that. But so he's also,
Yeah.
you know, like I don't know if he was writing his biography for Jeffrey Epstein or what he was doing, hanging out with him that long.
Well, who doesn't want to be in the Caribbean for a free holiday?
And he did say that in hindsight, that was a mistake. So, you know, we do have to give him that, right? He said in hindsight. Iran dictatorship expands ban on dog walking. So they don't want anybody to walk their dogs there. So the Islamic dictatorship in Iran has discovered a new way to prevent people from having fun by banning dog walking. And that would start a riot here in Kelowna if somebody did that, right?
Just anywhere in Canada, I think. Not just a riot, it'd be like an insurrection, wouldn't it? It'd be the real deal.
Yeah, there you go. And Iran, they funded a lot of that Hamas stuff, so they, you know. So
Indeed, and
the
fed
dogs.
them a lot of their weapons as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they're against dogs. Let's move on to some
And
of the
fun.
BC. What's that?
And fun.
Yeah, and fun. Let's move on to the BC and local news here. The pediatric ward closure in Colona triggers fears of a ripple effect in BC hospitals. Dr. Jeff Epler, emergency room physician at KGH, is getting ready for a hectic summer. He's not only thinking about the typical seasonal spikes, but the ripple effects of the closure of the hospital's dedicated pediatric ward from May 26th to July 4th, due what the Interior Health has called limited physician availability. There you go.
Well, he's worried. The discussion here in this article. This is a Canadian Press article, but it's mainly just like a rehash of all the things that we've already done anyway, or like a summary master article, you might call it. But the thing that's quite interesting here is where they say it's going to push demand potentially onto Vernon and Penticton, which is tiny anyway, and even the Kootenays, it says, again, which are tiny. And it's just like it highlights the irony of how it's usually the other way around, for obvious reasons, because KGH is much better funded and better staffed than those sort of smaller regional hospitals. But now it's going to be the other way around, and people, I mean, God forbid that it should ever happen to anyone, but there are going to be people that maybe have to go to the Kootenays from Colona to get urgent care for or care for their kids. I mean, that would just be so horrible. Have to do the little ferry and everything like that. It'd just be nuts.
Our own Josh Duncan spoke to the Interior Health CEO on the culture of fear at KGH. And she said she heard those comments too recently. And that was her responding after I had Gavin Dew on Kelowna Mission, MLA Gavin Dew in an interview. And Dew claimed that he'd heard about a culture of fear at KGH where doctors and nurses are genuinely fearful of speaking out or even claim that the leadership is authoritarian. And she said she heard those comments recently too, and they need to be addressed. And then she told Josh, like anything, unpacking it and where it's coming from and why it's happening is critical. And she's near the end of she's retiring, I think, in 6 months here as well.
It's been quite eventful for Interior Health, hasn't it? An eventful few years. There's also that chap who has just been stripped of his medical license. I can't remember exactly what his job was. Was he deputy leader or something? Who was convicted of sexual assault, child sexual assault charges. And then obviously there's the whole hullabaloo about COVID, that many people in the area are not over yet, not even close. Yeah. They're still furious about that. Well, talk about authoritarian, they accuse them of being authoritarian.
Yeah, I still know a few healthcare professionals that refuse to go back because they still have this registry that they're not giving up on for COVID.
Yeah, it's in, there's a lot of work to do. Whoever's going to replace Susan Brown. Huh?
So Josie Osborne, this came out, I think, on Friday. They're targeting the U.S. doctors and nurses with recruitment ads. They're going to spend like $5 million targeting doctors and nurses in the United States, citing chaos under the Trump administration. Some of these ads that they're going to run are just going to show the chaos and then just saying, look to BC, look how nice it is here. And she says that in some ways that they can be competitive in wages with the U.S. And we did ask, because they did. They said they got the U.S. in their bullseye target, but then they're going to go back to the United Kingdom. They've been to the United Kingdom. They ran ads, and we asked them. This is still outstanding with the ministry. We asked for the amount that was spent and what we got for it. That's about a month and a half old now with a Freedom of Information Act, because they refused to give it to us because they say they don't know the numbers. How come they know this number? They know they're going to spend $5 million in the U.S., but they can't remember how much they spent in the U.K. Because we did that story how many months ago, and we actually showed the ads that were running in the U.K. subways and stuff like that. But they can't remember how much they spent, nor can they tell us what they got for it. And even with an FOI that's easily, like, it's got to be 5-6 weeks old now. How long can they stall an FOI?
Well, they can think of all kinds of reasons. Yeah, I've been stalled indefinitely before.
Are we eventually going to get a document that's just all black lines, all blacked out?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I don't know why. I don't know how they could possibly justify it, but there have been cases where people have had to go to court to try and force information to be released because they're so stubborn.
But here's the thing. They've already been advertising in the United States. They've been advertising. They won't tell us in this article. It doesn't tell us how much they spent. They're saying they're going to launch another $5 million campaign with targeted ads to recruit doctors and nurses in the United States, because they think everything is politics, right? Like that there's doctors and nurses looking to flee the United States.
Yeah. They actually showed one or two of the ads at this press conference, and it was exceedingly cringe. It was cringe on a level that might surprise you, where a giant pink heart kind of like flows out of someone's chest. It goes to British Columbia. It's so cringe. And it's like, obviously, there's like a nurse in the staff room or something, and she hears something that's like, I can't remember if it's a direct reference or a kind of allusion to Donald Trump. It's like some sort of reference about some craziness in the US. And that's when the heart flies off.
So what we should...
I mean, if there are any Americans that are going to go for that level of cringe, then, all the power to them.
Here's a couple of questions. One is, how much did they spend already in the U.S. and what they get for it? Two, you're now spending again, if you buy Canadian, you're now spending again on social media giants in the United States, $5 million. How much of that is spent on creation of these cringe ads? And how much of it is spent on the social media giants? And then where is this Support Canada? And why is Bill C-18 still in effect? Like, clean up our backyard, man, and spend that $5 million convincing those 20 pediatricians in Kelowna to go back to work in the hospital.
Yep.
Money better spent. They're here.
The thing is, I just can't. When I saw this come through, so it was the second big press conference just about this scheme. I thought, like, there is no way that they're doing this unless they've got something like really big. They're going to have something huge here, and they're going to, like, all the naysayers are going to be humiliated. And then I sat and watched that press conference, and it was just to show these ads. That's it. And then they talked about this one single doctor from the US who's going to come and work somewhere in I can't remember where it was now, the Lower Mainland somewhere. I think, maybe it was the island. And that's not till November. And they were just talking about this one guy, and I was just and showing these ads, and I was just thinking, what the hell are you doing?
Quite the return.
This is so much time that they're spending on this, and it's what you say. It's like, fix things, like fix KGH, fix Lillooet, like just do the basics. But instead of that, they're trying to kind of distract with this nonsense that can tap into people's political loyalties.
Yeah. They're blaming somebody else, and they've utilized Trump as the thing, right? It's Trump's fault. News for you: our health system has been deteriorating long before Trump got elected. And it's just getting worse and worse. And you can look towards immigration, the record-setting immigration, as to some of the reasons for that. And then, again, there's 20 pediatricians here in Kelowna that won't work in the hospital. And the CEO of Interior Health recognizes that there's a culture of fear. Well, they instilled that fear when they threatened to fire everybody that dared speak out, even during COVID. Why would anybody speak here? It's like, how many people work in communications in Interior Health? 12, 15?
Rather a lot. Certainly if you look at as well, because that's just Interior Health, obviously. That's actually quite a sort of small public
And
body overall.
and when we reach out
you
for
look at all the
comment,
departments.
how often do we get a comment when we reach out?
Yeah, and how rapidly is that received? I think people would be surprised.
And then that FOI has been outstanding for 6 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and they don't know the number. Come on, you know they know the number. How could they not know the number?
You need to know, and that's obviously the reason they don't want to talk about that is because it didn't succeed.
Right. So, but part of it is just being honest, and that part eludes them. There you go.
That's politicians for you.
And then this is from the BC Chamber of Commerce. We show you some of the graphs here too, but this is a National Post article here. And it says it's an opinion piece of David Eby's Clean BC initiative, a greater hit to the economy than Trump's tariffs. And that was said at the BC Chamber of Commerce AGM on June 4th. Ken Peacock, the former chief economist at the Business Council of BC, presented analysis indicating that NDP's Clean BC initiative has been actually a far greater hit to the province's sputtering economy than any tariffs. From 2019 to 2024, it cost BC $29.3 billion in lost GDP, and projected to cost the province a further $109 billion between now and 2029. And that's, they say, that's David Eby's economic leadership and action, ideology torpedoing economic prosperity for hardworking British Columbians.
Yeah, but I mean, you say all that, but at least it is actually having a material effect on global temperatures. It is bringing them down, isn't it, Dave?
Is that the
what's that,
English?
Dave? It's not. Oh dear.
That's that English sarcasm once again, that rears its ugly head, right?
Beautiful head, I think.
And then we're talking about housing crisis, and then this is one here in Colona, that the third tiny home site is being unveiled. We might get some of those with Mark Carney's modular home building here. Everybody will be looking forward to something like this. Nearly 2 years after the City of Colona and Provincial Colona struck a deal to tackle homelessness, the pair unveiled their third tiny home site here on Friday, and that's Balsam Place. And Tom Dias said, the mayor of Colona, there's an urgent need to discuss the gap between shelter and permanent housing, create a temporary housing option that provides stability and support while opening up space and shelters for those living outdoors. And there's no doubt about it. People having to live outside is absolutely atrocious for a modern nation such as Canada, especially one that could be so rich, right? And he says these sites are helping people transition out of encampments into services, care, and ultimately housing. There you go. That's the third one.
It's beyond housing, though, isn't it? People simplify it and make it seem like it's just all about houses, but this is more of a sort of, I guess, what would be called mental health issue these days, like in most cases. But it can't hurt to have extra houses, but they are rather modest, aren't they? These
Shed-looking.
They are rather shed-like. And I'm not sure about this acronym, HALF. You see that acronym?
Yeah.
Why do people who work in the public sector have to invent like the cringe acronyms? You don't have to have an acronym, you know, Mr. Public Servant. You can just not have one.
People love spin, and the only way to get good spin is have a slogan. There you go.
So.
And this is from the Conservative Party of BC. David Eby's government quietly hired former NDP Minister George Haymon as special advisor on public sector bargaining, only revealed when his LinkedIn changed. There you go. Nothing like, this is from Rob Shaw. Eby's Inner Circle looking like a jobs program for the BC NDP alumni. All in the family.
That's not gonna, again, I find myself saying this every single day. That is not how you restore trust in institutions and democracy, is it? I mean, it's just so irresponsible. And again, it's being irresponsible at something that doesn't belong to them, which is, you know, our institutions. You can't do that. It's not up to you to do that.
Let's move on to the markets here. And I don't have a lot here on the markets other than the markets are actually up right now. They're up about 90 points. It's relatively flat, and they've been relatively flat for a while. Lots of turmoil going on, so market's relatively flat. Gold is relatively flat as well. It's kind of like bouncing in that range. And I think it's up about 24 bucks this morning, you know, up one day, 24 down. But the one that's interesting, though, for sure, and we don't put it up very often, but silver has gone on a bit of a run, for sure. Silver is now at, you know, like just under $37 an ounce. And silver is the poor man's gold. So silver getting some attention, breaking that $30 mark, which has kind of been held back for a while. But there you go, silver making a run. And Bitcoin, our friend the Bitcoin, more and more
It
talk
happens
of
now
people.
and then, doesn't it, with silver? It becomes very like memey and fashionable.
What's that? Silver? I missed that.
I'm saying, I don't know if I'm cutting out here. Maybe I am. I'm just saying silver goes through these patches where it's like the most fashionable thing in the world, isn't it? And I know, like, on forums like Reddit, there was a period where they were actually obsessed with silver.
Yeah, they tried that.
It does become a bit of a meme sometimes.
Yeah, they tried that silver squeeze a while back. It must be when those meme stocks were going crazy, and it started to run, but then it fizzled. And then silver has some other uses other than just like, you know, gold is, you know, more of a store of value, but silver actually has a lot of industrial uses as well. And but that it's doing quite well. The last big squeeze, well, way back when the Hunt brothers, way back when, tried to corner the market on silver and ran it up a bit, but then got a lesson out of it as well. Bitcoin. Currently, I think it's at 108. It looks like it's going to try and take a run at its highs. More people talking about putting it into reserves, and so the company's starting to look at it as well. Bitcoin, again, has the wind in its sails. And I would say that, you know, any setbacks are definitely, a lot of people are likely looking at it as buying opportunities as opposed to that it's going to fall. I think right now any pullbacks are viewed as buying opportunities. You can kind of see that in the way the chart's trading. The Canadian dollar, I don't think that talk about the pipelines here, you can see it's pulled back a little bit. That to talk about the pipelines needing permission from all the provinces and all that is going to go well for the Canadian dollar. Because how are you going to make Canada into this energy superpower without the oil and gas? That's my question. Like, I'm not sure where the rest of the superpower comes from. Where the superpowers are coming from? Maybe they're watching Paw Patrol or something like that, and they're getting some superpowers from some alien rock that comes beamed down from outer space. But until they show us,
don't remind me of Paw Patrol.
Until they show us where this energy superpower comes from, if it doesn't come from oil and gas right now, I'm not sure. Speaking of oil and gas, West Texas Intermediate up about 60 cents this morning. And again, down the middle there, Western Canadian Select continues to sell at the discount at 52 bucks. There you go. There you go. And then we got some little tech stuff to talk about. We're going to kind of go through this. Really kind of cool. Looks like Amazon's going to invest about $20 billion in Pennsylvania to expand AI and cloud infrastructure. And then Cadillac, the Cadillac Optic VEV is going to launch here. And it's the first vehicle to feature the native Tesla charging port, the NACS charging port. And it's going to be US priced at $68,000. So what is that, like 300,000 in Canada? 68,000, about 100 grand here in Canada.
Once the various taxes and regulations.
Yeah, if we add the taxes on the luxury
probably.
tax, this tax, that tax, and it'll be like easily like 135,000. The range of 275 miles. What is it, about 430 kilometers, something like that. It's going to have an 85 kilowatt battery pack, 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. There you go. And then this one is really interesting. ChatGPT now can make phone calls for you. If you want to cancel something, you can actually have this chat bot here actually make calls for you. Interesting.
It's pretty great. I mean, that speaks any language. That's possibly the coolest thing there.
Yeah, and then Neuralink, this is a really cool one for Neuralink here. I think we have a clip on, no, and we don't. I don't know. That's fine anyway. Neuralink, though, epic breakthrough. Neuralink is actually helping somebody thought to text. Isn't that cool? If you put up that next image, or thought to text.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Although it could also be awkward.
Yeah, that's right. Just like, whoops, I didn't mean to say that. And then this...
It's a lot of, just kidding.
And then this is in our You Serious section. And this is, we're going to have to put this in our You Serious. And look at that price of 3 steaks. Canada.
It's even got the maple leaf just to...
And this is Joe Warmington, a reporter here. And then he put that out and he tagged Mark Carney and Ford Nation. And $108 for 3 steaks.
At Costco as well, that is.
Pretty soon they'll be doing videos on CBC on how to get more out of your beef prices, where you just take that steak and slice it thinner. You can get like 12 steaks out of that.
They'll be teaching us how to have like beef bone broth or something like that one day, or like cow's eyeball burgers.
Yeah. Anyway, this one's there for your sense of humor. Just a regular mom trying to not raise liberals.
What does that even mean?
And then this one here, Maclean's put out this article and says, nervous about crossing the border. You should be. And I don't know, I just crossed and I went to California and I was there for a week. The border crossing was absolutely amazing. And the people down there were absolutely amazing. So I don't know.
I'm tempted just to go down to New York State. It's only about 45 minutes away, and just do like a U-turn. Just go over the bridge and then come straight back, just to see what happens. Just to sort of wind them up.
Well, according to this article, be afraid. Be very, very afraid.
Yeah, I mean, they can be awful, as almost anybody.
I mean, they could have been awful before, because I know.
But yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, I was going to say, like,
I've had terrible crossings.
They always had that up their sleeve, didn't they?
10 years ago, and I've had great crossings, and I've crossed many times. And like I said, the last one I went there, and I was crossing over. I said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to a conference in near the San Francisco area." And he said, "Welcome to the United States. Have a great time." That was it.
Yeah. No, I've had ones like that where in fact, the vast majority have been like that, and I've had some pretty hard ones coming into Canada as well. I remember when I came over on the ferry and landed in Victoria from Seattle, I think, or something like that. Anyway, and it was such a weird experience. It was and obviously that video went viral, didn't it, recently, of the Canadian border guard asking about a woman's entire life history. Yeah. Like the Canadian border guard, and that's a good thing, I would say. Anyway, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but Canadian border guards can be quite tough as well.
Yeah, and they usually, sometimes I've been asked where you're staying, you got a hotel room, you got all this stuff, and they want to make sure that you're actually going somewhere. He didn't. He's just have a great time. And it wasn't busy either. That's the thing, when I crossed, because it was late at night. And he could have played with me because he had all the time in the world. There wasn't a big lineup behind me.
Yeah, I've had that situation. For some reason, usually when there's no one there, that's when it's easiest, I find. I crossed into Montana and it was just absolutely desolate, and you couldn't see another soul anywhere. And it was just in and out. I thought he would have wanted to just chat with me out of loneliness, but
I tried crossing once. Into this was probably 15 years ago. We were supposed to cross in Christina Lake because we were catching a flight in Spokane to Houston, and it was closed. My buddy said it was 24 hours, so I had to go to Roslyn. So now we're late and we're trying to get across, and we had to go. We're almost out of gas now because we had to go to a different crossing in Roslyn. My wife had to go to the bathroom really bad, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning now, and I think our flight was at 6 a.m. or something like that. And I get there and I said, hello. And then I said, is there a washroom we can use here? And do you know where I can find gas? And oh, he just got so angry with me. And it was again, the middle of the night. And he said, ranted for a bit. And then he said, you back up and come forward again. I'm like, okay. And he said, ask permission to come into my house first. I'm like, okay. I had to back up like 20 feet and then drive forward and do it all over again, like a reset. And I'm like, good evening, sir. And then he's like, what's your business here? I said, well, I'm trying to catch a flight to Spokane. And then he's like, he's like passport and all that stuff. I gave all that to him. And then he says, welcome to the United States. No washrooms here, just down the road. There's a gas station, you can get gas. But and he was so nice. I'm just like, why did he need to do that little power trip with me? I don't know, but I guess that made him feel good.
I guess it's just, that sounds to me a lot like the sort of, that's the kind of thing that gets drilled into you in the military, isn't it? Where it's like, it's all just about respect. And once respect is established, then you can be friendly. So maybe he was in the military.
Made me back up and then drive forward.
That does sound like basic training or something, though, doesn't it? It's like reverse private.
I'm glad he didn't tell me to go all the way home and come again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He said
just
back up,
like ban you for life, which they have the power to do, don't they?
He said back up 20 feet and then try again. I'm just like, okay. And then when I was on the flight, I told that story I ended up sitting with a Texas Ranger. And I told him that story, and he said he was quite embarrassed about the whole thing, but who knows?
Well, I guess it's like, for some people, it must be really boring and lonely, and then there probably is quite a lot of disrespect. I've even seen it when I've been in the line. I've seen people like scream at them and stuff. So I guess after a few years, it must just grind them down a bit.
There you go. That's our show today. Sorry we're late. We'll be back tomorrow, hopefully at 9 a.m. And we do thank you for watching and commenting for sure, like our regulars that are here every morning. We do thank you. You can't be early when you're already late, you moron. I don't know, is that for us or who's that? Anyone think that this would be happening if Donald J. Trump were not president? I don't know what that means. So anyway.
I can't even see that. I don't even know which one you mean.
I think it's like a 4 or 5 up there. It's Ray. Ray is saying that. I don't know what Ray is trying to say. I don't know.
Chill out, Ray.
Chill out. Until tomorrow. Thanks, Ian. We'll see you tomorrow for the coffee chat. We look forward to it. And thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Colona Now, local, independent. News you can trust.